Hi, parents and caregivers and family of Baker Elementary. My name is Alexis Prinz. I am the school social worker. Some of you might remember me from doing a parent workshop last year. I am excited to do this again. I will not lie that I would love to see you all in person and be able to have a little bit more of a conversation versus recording myself. Nonetheless, I am happy to do this and excited to get this book out to you and as a resource. Today, I want to kind of briefly go over a summary of this book and the strategies in it. It's pretty large, so obviously I probably won't be able to touch on everything, but I would love that if after you read this and you have more questions or want to have a conversation, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to be able to do that. So the name of the book is called The Whole Brain Child. I picked it because last year I did a workshop on anxiety, and I kind of wanted to think of something different but also still connecting with child development and mental health, and I thought that this was a great book to do so. It definitely focuses a lot on parenting, a little bit more of that than specifically mental health, anxiety, things like that, but I still think it's a great read. I want to start out by saying I myself am not a parent. I still found it beneficial for my work as a school counselor, but I am by no means an expert. I'm not here to bestow a bunch of my wisdom. You all have, if you're here and you're listening as a parent, you all have much more experience than I do. But nonetheless, I think that this is just a great way to kind of start a conversation about child development and how we can best support children, especially children who are very sensitive, are experiencing anxiety, have some past traumas, or just need a little bit more help developing those skills regarding coping with emotions and big feelings. All right, so what I plan to do is this book has 12 steps for kind of dealing with big emotions, and I'm going to just briefly go through all 12 of those, give a few of my takeaways, and then like I said, if you read it yourself and want to have a further conversation, please feel free to reach out. Okay, so this book has 12 steps, and then it also does a really great job of breaking down child development in the brain and giving some really simple and clear analogies about how children's brains develop, which was very helpful for me. I'm not a doctor or a scientist, so their analogies were really great and helpful. It started out talking about the right brain and the left brain, which most of us have probably a pretty basic understanding of. The right brain being that of the creative one, the brain that experiences feelings like music, art, pays more attention to nonverbals and things like that, versus the left brain that is more based in logic and reasoning and rules and likes lists and numbers and that kind of more rigid part of the brain. This book, right in the beginning, explains that oftentimes when children are experiencing big emotions, and truthfully I believe this can be true of adults, that they are functioning in that right brain, that part that feels those feelings, that creative, more in touch with the emotion side, but also the reactive side. And that makes it harder for adults to use logic to help calm them down, which is something I think we all know, but it was a really great reminder just reading. So the first strategy that they put in there is the whole brain strategy, number 1, connect and then redirect. And this is a great, kind of goes with the right brain. It's a great reminder. Oftentimes when I'm sure at home, but also when here I'm at school, I'm in a time crunch and there's a kid that's having an emotional outburst or kind of crises, and I am trying to calm them down quickly, partially because there's something exciting or good around the corner that I want them to get to. For example, if someone's having a hard time right before recess, I sometimes try to just come out with logic. Let's just quick pick those chairs up and we can go out to the playground and then we'll be okay. And kind of use a lot of language and explaining, and this book really very clearly addressed that that's not going to work. That's not how our children's brains work. They are in that right brain, and if we don't connect to those emotions and those feelings, we're not going to be able to use logic to kind of explain to them what's going on. They're not going to connect to that logic. So forcing logic is probably just going to either create a bigger problem or make the problem last longer. Even though we think, oh, there's only 10 minutes of recess left and I want you to get out there as quick as possible. No, you know what, we need to get down on their level and just really connect to those emotions, and then we can go forward with redirecting about maybe what the problem was, what behavior we need to fix, but we need to address those emotions first. All right. I wanted to show you, just to kind of give you an example of this book. Oftentimes in the book, it will kind of give you the strategy, and then there'll be a personal story of a parent and a personal situation that happened, and it'll give the parents kind of ways they handled it. And I just think that was really great because it'll give you, hands-on examples of what happened and one way of handling it versus the other. All right, so the next strategy is called Name It to Tame It. This is all about storytelling and having your kid reflect on what happened and naming their feelings and, being really aware of what was going on. I believe that all of these strategies are great and really beneficial, but this one I think is particularly beneficial for kids that might be experiencing anxiety or some past trauma, anything like that. Being able to really talk through those feelings is incredibly helpful. And one note that they put in here was, if you're having that sit-down conversation, if it is a very young child all the way up to middle school, high school, if there is something that they can be doing or something that you can be doing together while talking, that will definitely help the conversation flow. If you're just sitting down at the kitchen table, let's talk back and forth with nothing else going on, it's probably going to be really hard to get that conversation flowing. But if you can be coloring or drawing or building something together, even driving in the car, just something that distracts you a little bit so that often gets the conversation flowing more. All right, I was going to go to another visual here. I was going to read. Okay, so this is about the Name It and Tame It strategy. It says, what kids often need when they're experiencing strong emotions is to have someone help use their left brain to make sense of what's going on, to put in order and to name those big, scary right brain feelings so they can deal with them effectively. This is what storytelling does. It allows us to understand ourselves and our world by using both our left and right brains together. I just liked that little bit. Okay, the next part of the book goes for strategies number 2, 3, and 4, and talks about the ways that you can obviously cope with big emotions, but also helps us understand how our brain works. It uses an analogy of our brain having a downstairs and an upstairs. There's a very nice little visual of the fist, and it talks about our downstairs brain being what we develop first. That is the part of the brain that kind of is developed from birth. It helps us with physical things like breathing, swallowing, things like that, but then also that fight, flight, or freeze emotions, those emotional reactions that happen without thinking, the things that need to happen, kind of survival mode. When a child is hungry, they cry. If you're scared, you're crying. If you touch something hot, you pull your hand away. Those reactions that happen right away that are very survivalist and are very necessary, but as children, they continue to use those skills unless they're taught to use their upstairs brain that is a little bit more complex and has more of those problem solving, reasoning, thinking, body control, morality, empathy, those skills that are harder to develop later on. This chapter really talks about how to develop those skills and how to develop that upstairs brain, but reminding us that our kids might be using their downstairs brain of the fight, flight, or freeze, and that we need to teach them those skills because they might just be reacting right away. So the goal of this chapter is really to help us understand where children are at and then help set realistic expectations for them. The first strategy is engage, don't enrage, which is one of the classic ones that is a whole lot easier said than done. When you've had a long day and there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of chaos and things going on, sometimes it's really difficult to just connect and engage and address the problem versus getting a little bit emotionally upset yourself. We're all humans here. So of course this is much easier said than done, but I think it's just a good reminder, and that's a good read in here. The next strategy is use it or lose it, which I really like. This talks a lot about how we need to practice these skills when we're calm. Because sometimes when our kid has a big emotional reaction, we want them to be able to take a break, be able to talk about their feelings, be able to take deep breaths, be able to use some of those skills. But if we're not practicing them when they're calm, we don't know how to do those things. So this section of the book just really gives a lot of great examples of how to practice those strategies, what to do, how to incorporate that into your life. And I think that's very beneficial. I do that all the time at school. Teach kids a break protocol, teach them how to ask for help, because when you're in the fight or flight and your lid flipped, if you're looking at that example of your downstairs brain and your prefrontal cortex, when you've gotten to a point where your emotions are out of control, you're not able to think of, okay, what are all these ways to calm me down? Because you're already kind of too far gone. And if you haven't learned them, it makes it even more difficult. So I think that section is really helpful. All right. The next section is move it or lose it. This is a simple, short and sweet chapter that is just talking about the importance of movement and activity in order to help calm a brain. It's so often that I feel like we talk about this, especially at school. We talk about movement breaks. We talk about getting up and changing what you're doing. And this can obviously be healthy for health and your body, your physical health, but it's also so helpful for your mind. It can be a form of meditation. If you are really upset, you can change what you're thinking about, do an activity, and then that hopefully, if it's kind of a complex active thing, your child is only allowed to think, okay, I've got to step here, I've got to do this, I'm climbing up on the swing, or I'm on the swing now, and you're able to kind of forget about the other stressors and just focus on what your body's doing. So it's a really short little part, but I think it's a definitely important thing to remember when talking about the whole brain and how to cope with big emotions. The next step is called Use the Remote of Mind. This kind of connects back to the storytelling part that was in step 2. It talks a lot about how we need to allow kids to kind of learn how to set boundaries, but also how they need to talk about memories and talk about past feelings. Again, this is a great chapter if you have a child that has some past trauma or has trouble dealing with past emotions, or emotions that kind of linger, and this just helps understand what it's like to have memories. There's a great visual, let me find very quickly, showing us, which would be a great thing to show with an older kid. Maybe you could look at this together about what our memories are like and what our past traumas might feel like. And a lot of times we think our memories are just like a movie scene where we can just see start to finish what happened, but that's often not the case. It's often more of a puzzle piece where we remember this little bit of the situation and this part, and it's so jumbled that sometimes it's hard for kids and adults to process. So being able to kind of go through this with a child, I think, would be really beneficial, because you could piece together those memories and then use that as a talking point. And then the remote of mind part of this step, I think, is really great about the boundary setting, because it teaches us as adults that we can't just always have them talk to us. If we want to get this information now, we have to allow them the boundary to say, I don't want to talk about that right now. I want to use my remote control and I want to pause, and we can go back to that later. So I think that it's chapter 4. I think it's a great chapter in the book to kind of take some time on. All right, number 7 is remembering to remember. This one I enjoyed. I felt like it was, it seems like a basic thing that we probably do a lot, and I'm sure a lot of you parents do this in your daily life, but it's a great reminder and a great way how to maybe be more intentional with these kind of conversations. So the idea of remembering to remember is talking to your kids about their day and teaching them how to express their emotions, teaching them how to talk about what happened, what was good, what was bad. Maybe doing one of those, what are your highs and lows of the day? And really focusing on how to get that information out and how to talk about our feelings, and give so many examples. I think it's really, really great. A great point that I took away from it is not just talking about the positives. And it's a good thing for me to remember, because we just got back from holiday break, and my first thing is how was your break? Was it so much fun? Did you play outside? Did you see any family? You ask all these really positive questions, and sometimes it's hard for me to remember, was there anything over break that happened that you didn't like? And those can be really important conversations as well. It's important for kids to know that disappointments happen, because disappointments happen daily, right? And it makes it feel less hopeless when those disappointments happen, just knowing it's kind of part of life. It's something that happens. I think another important thing is to share our disappointments with young kids. Let them know. That will help them build their perspective, which is a very important skill, but also let them know that we have disappointments, and that, they felt upset and they're okay. They've overcome that as well. So that kind of goes through all of that. Also, another part of it has talking about the memories again, especially for older kids. I've got a sticky note right here. There's these cool wheels that you could do with memories, especially if you've got an anxious kid that has a fear, or a kid with some past trauma. I think this activity would be really beneficial. All right. Number 8. I like this one. This one's got a great little writing on here. It says, let the clouds of emotions roll by. And I know I'm just overloading with the feelings talk and the emotions, and I kind of sound like that typical counselor right now, just talking about feelings all day long, which is very comfortable for me, because that's a little bit of what I do. But it's just really important, and I think that this book does a really good job of expressing how that's an important part of conversations we need to be having with kids, especially for their development. And this, I'm going to read a little part from here, but it says, as we've said repeatedly in our journey through this book, it's very important that kids learn how to understand their feelings. But it's also true that feelings need to be recognized for what they are: temporary, changing conditions. These are states, not traits. They're like the weather. Rain is real, and we'd be foolish to stand in a downpour and act as if it weren't actually raining. But we'd be just as foolish to expect that the sun will never reappear. I love that, partially because it's very poetic, but when we get in a state, and especially children who don't have the same brain development as we are, and they're still in that downstairs brain that hasn't figured out those processings of emotions, it feels so daunting. It feels like this is how I'm going to feel forever. Especially children with anxiety, children who are experiencing depression. It feels like there is no way this weight is ever going to get lifted off of my chest, and this just feels too heavy to take. And this chapter does a really great job of helping you talk to your children about the fact that feelings come and go, and it's a wave of emotions. And yes, you can feel really down or really scared, but then you'll feel better. And you know what? When you're feeling better, yes, we need to know that those feelings might come back, and we can prepare for them, and that's when we can go back to some of those other steps and use it, don't lose it. And we can practice those meditation skills, and we can practice deep breathing, and we can, practice all of those other coping skills while we're still calm, because we know that the wave will come again. But I think it's a really great chapter, kind of talking about preparing for emotions, but also understanding that they will go away and we will get better. So I enjoyed that one. All right. The next one is, we're almost done, paying attention to what's going on inside. Again, here I am telling you, talk about feelings over and over. I understand it gets a little bit repetitive, but it just keeps going about how beneficial that can be. using visuals is a really great thing to do with young children. I think often, especially kids at Baker Elementary, when they're very young, we get stuck in sad, mad, happy, and there's not any other emotions than that, and that sometimes makes it confusing and sometimes makes it hard to process those feelings because we're annoyed or we're worried or we're scared, and those don't fit in those emotions that we understand. So this chapter is just really kind of talking about connecting to that and making sure that we are, talking more extensively. Like, how was your day? Good. Okay. Obviously, you do not need to have these deep, in-depth conversations with your kids every day. That would be incredibly tedious, and I know that you have 100 other things on your plate. But it just gives more examples of how those conversations can happen. All right, the next one is exercise mindset. Kind of, again, it's just another way of talking about how we can get back to the hub, how we can get back to feeling calm and centered. So it has a lot of skills that you can practice. So that's another great one. All right. Whole brain strategy number 11. I am going to just say, parents, you take this one. It has increased the family fun factor, and I have full confidence that you have this down. I have a niece and I have fun with her, but beyond that, I can't. I'm not going to speak to the family fun factor. I think that you guys probably all are doing a great job with that. But it's a fun chapter that might give you some ideas or spark some of your interests. All right, then the last one I really enjoy as well. It is called Connecting. The strategy is called Connecting Through Conflict, Teaching Kids to Argue with We in Mind. I like that saying, arguing with we in mind. I think we could all learn from that. As I've said a bunch of times, I do not have children, but I have a husband, and often when I argue, I'm arguing with me in mind, not with we in mind. So this does a great job of helping us teach kids that, when a conflict happens, it's not always just about winning. It's not always about getting what you want out of that. We have to realize that there are always two sides in a conflict. And while you're arguing or while you're in that state, you have to understand that there's another side. And so it kind of goes back into the perspective-taking skills, kind of like what I was talking about in Chapter 4, which goes really in depth into those skills. Or not Chapter 4, number 4. So overall, this is, I think, a great read. I'm sorry to kind of drag on this video chat, but I hope that this was a little bit helpful of a summary. Like I said, I wish we could have a little bit more of a discussion about this. I will be more than willing to answer questions if anybody would like to talk more. Did I have one more page I was going to read? Let me see. I can't find it. Oh, I wanted to show you this. That was what I was going to do. At the very back of it, I enjoy this part. So it has there's the 12 steps that I kind of went through, but this back breaks it down by age. So you have infant to 3-year-old, and kind of responses you can do for there, and it goes all the way up to later school age, 9 to 12, and I think then there's teenagers too. So that's just a nice little resource in the back that might be great to look at. If you enjoy this book and you think, wow, I would really like to try some of these strategies, obviously you can just go from the book and do that there, but if you want to go even more in depth, there is a workbook that I have used a little bit here at school that's been helpful, and there's, it has the visuals of the brain and everything like that, and then kind of questionnaires you could do with kids in your family, things like where you can talk about triggers and then talk about problem-solving solutions. So I think it's a great book. I just gave you a whole bunch of information. Hopefully I didn't ramble on too long. Hopefully I made some sense, but thank you for listening. I hope that this was helpful, and hopefully I can see you all in person for a conversation like this next year. All right, goodbye.